why. Don Fear, wasn't fired. Don Fear left of his own volition. Why did the players' union vote him an $11 million payment? I know this is going to sound snarky, but you could have given the man a gold watch. It wouldn't have to have been an $11 million one-time payment. That $11 million could have easily funded, the monies that we're talking about. Let's say you only give the men like George $10,000 a year. Only $10,000. You'd only have to pay $8.7 million a year. Expend that amount. Given the economy of this game, which is a $7 billion industry, that's a drop in the bucket. That's chump change. And I couldn't agree with you more. You could find revenue streams in a variety of places. The licensing money is one great place to look. You made an interesting point at the outset of the program. You made an analogy. Whenever you hear about football retirees, you always see Mike Ditka or maybe the cornerback from the Detroit Lions, the Hall of Famer Lem Barney, advocating about their situation. And I think it wasn't too long ago that in the court of law, the NFL was found to be withholding a share of the licensing revenue for the retirees who played pro football. And they won a judgment last June of $26.25 million. So there's money out there, certainly in football, and I know there's money in baseball, and I'm really interested, as long as we're talking about licensing revenue. I don't know if you or your listeners know this, Gillette, which has had, an agreement with Major League Baseball for, it's got to be close to 100 years, if more than 100 years, if not more so. They've just taken Major League Baseball to court. So I'm really interested to see what happens.
I think that Budweiser is also taking them to court. They had
I beg your pardon. It could be it could be Anheuser-Busch. You're right.
Yeah,
it may not be Gillette, but one of the premium ones.
Yeah, they had signed a deal with them, and then it seems that Major League Baseball is trying to either get out from under it or trying to add other breweries to be the official beer of Major League Baseball. And as someone who goes to games, and I don't drink, I wish that they'd get rid of the alcohol at some of these games, because there's too many people who go to games. It's a big night out for them. I don't know how they afford to get drunk at a game with the price of beer, but that's that's a whole other subject. But George, I wanted to talk to you about your career with the Mets, and it's fascinating. When I sent emails out to a few people, telling them about the show tonight, and I mentioned that you were going to be a guest on the show, I never got such a response from anybody. And I've had Doug Glanville on this program. I've had some top Met bloggers on this program. Uh-huh. But when they heard that you were going to be on the show tonight, people were like going through the roof. They couldn't wait to hear you tonight. You still have a huge following here with Met fans in New York City.
Well, and don't think I don't appreciate it. And the Mets have been really good to me. They've invited me back many times. And so, it's a mutual admiration that my experiences there in New York. And now what is this about the Eddie Kranepool Society, Steve?
Well, I went back about 9 years ago when blogging started to become all the rage.
Uh-huh.
I was reading Red Sox blogs and Yankee blogs and Cubs blogs, and there was no Mets blogs. So I decided, you know what, I'll take a shot at this and see if I can do something with it.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, what am I going to name this thing? And Ed Kranepool is my favorite all-time Met.
Uh-huh.
I'm 52 years old. All right, so back in 1964, as a 6-year-old in Brooklyn playing in Little League, I played first base because I'm left-handed, and I was a little on the chunky side as a kid, and I didn't run too fast.
Uh-huh.
So whenever I would hit a ground ball and I'd run, I'd hear some of the parents yelling, "Come on, Kranepool, make it down to first base. Get out of boy, Kranepool." And they called me Kranepool. And I started saying, wow, they're calling me a major league player. I must be really good, And being a Met fan, growing up as a Met fan, my father was a huge Met fan. He was a New York Giant fan and became a Met fan. And I just became a huge Ed Kranepool fan. To this day, when I go back to my neighborhood in Brooklyn, people who were still living around there when they see me, they call me that became my nickname as a kid. And
well,
I've had the great fortune of meeting Ed Kranepool a couple of times. I met him at a luncheon a couple of years ago, when they had a luncheon for the '69 Mets, the Jets, and the Knicks. And I got to meet him, and I got to meet Gil Hodges' wife and Tommy Agee's wife at this event. And I took a picture with Ed Kranepool, and on my Facebook page I have my profile picture as myself and Ed Kranepool. And then another thrill that I had was this year on my birthday. My wife had bought tickets for me, her, and my kids to go to Met game. And as we were going in, who do I meet at the ballpark but Eddie Kranepool? I told him it was my birthday. We shook hands. We had a nice conversation, and he gave me his card. And I've been trying to get in touch with him to get him to come on the program with me. So, I'm more than a diehard Met fan. My family has it's. When we go out to an event, my daughter, who's 11 years old, makes sure that I don't wear any kind of Met shirts or anything. She tells me I have to wear grown-up clothes when we go places.
Well, I appreciated Ed as a teammate and a good guy. However, if he would have had a little more torque in his hips through his swing, he'd be hitting like Babe Ruth. You tell him I said that if you see him.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, he still holds a lot of records in the Met record book on offense. He's still in the top 10 in just about every offense. And, one of my little pet projects is I'm trying to get that number 7 retired. As much as I like Jose Reyes, I don't like him wearing that number 7. I think that he should change it. Ed was an original Met. He was there from 1962. Like I say, he's still around the team. I've seen him I go to Brooklyn Cyclone games too, and I've seen him. He's done some games for SNY there. So he's still that's what this is the thing, players like yourself, Ed, guys like Wayne Garrett, guys like Rod Gaspar. These are the guys that Met fans love, and I think this is what separates the Met fan from the Yankee fan or any other fan. We appreciate all our players. You didn't have to be the greatest player of all time, but there's things that players did on the field that we've always appreciated. And the thing with you is you had a terrific minor league career with the Mets. You hit for power. You were California League MVP with the Vasilla team, and when you came up in '73, if I'm not mistaken, you were the defensive replacement for Willie Mays.
Well, I had to learn to play all the outfield positions because John Milner and Eddie Kranepool were playing first base, and so they put me anywhere. But Don Hahn was more the center fielder for Willie, but. What a thrill! You mentioned those names, and I think what a nice service you're doing too to keep memories alive, and the information that Doug is giving. It's just a great service to a lot of us players. So we appreciate you.
Oh, listen, it's my pleasure. Like I say, watching you guys, this is what I grew up with. When Doug was telling me about Jimmy Qualls, I remember that night like it was yesterday. It was a hot night in July, and the game was on Channel 9 in New York. And I remember after the game, where I lived in Brooklyn, everybody came out of their house because nobody could go to sleep after that game. We were I think we talked about that game until about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And to this day, people, guys my age, if you mention that game, they call the imperfect game. The guys will talk for hours about that game. But when after the '74 season, and in fact, one of your highlights in '74 was the back-to-back home runs back on July 7th, or July 20th rather. It was Cleon Jones, yourself, and I think Rusty Staub hit back 3 home runs back. Like that. That's
that was something. My only home run of the year was kind of historic, and of course I didn't play for 2 weeks after that, but it was. I can remember that pitch, and that we got 3 in a row. Yeah, that was something.
Well, George, can you, Steve? I just wanted to jump in here. One of the things, one of the highlights of the authors event that we had in Moroni, Utah, that George alluded to earlier, he told the story of how Cleon Jones was apparently a little shaken up in Game 4 of the '73 series, and here comes George. And Bando hits a shot to left center field. George, why don't you do the rest of it?
Well, let me give you a little background. That's the year that on July 7th, I was in a collision with Don Hahn against the Atlanta Braves in left center and dislocated my hip, which really changed my career.
I